Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm doing a book review on a very special book, and that is Lurking in the Dark, a Horrortube Anthology. This is a collection of short stories that are from all different creators all over Horrortube, aka BookTube, aka YouTube for people that like books, specifically horror books. If you've been following my channel for a while, you're probably familiar with the names of some of the people that have written stories in here. People like Pax Panic, Jeremy Fee, E.D. Lewis, and as I recently found out, Dave over from Dave and Olive. First of all, I want to say a big thank you to David over at David's Book Reviews for sending me a copy of this book. I won it in a giveaway. I won this one and Code Red. He sent them both to me. And again, this is one I probably would have picked up on my own eventually, just to help support my fellow creators here on BookTube, but I'm so glad that I got a copy. So thank you, David, again for sending this to me. Now, I always say this about short story collections, and I'm going to say it here again. There are stories in here that I really, really liked, that I really enjoyed, that I really connected with, and there were other short stories in here that I did not connect with as much. For me, the stories that I personally connected with the most are the stories that come from people that I quote unquote know. None of these people I've met in person, but I feel like through BookTube, through interacting in the comments section, and even over on Instagram, I feel like I have gotten to know a couple of these authors, a couple of these creators. So when I read their stories, I really feel like I know where they're coming from, and that kind of helps me appreciate the story more and connect with it more. That's not to say that because I don't know someone personally, I don't like the story. It's just easier to connect with some of those ones. Another thing I will say off the bat is that there are some stories in here that tend to be, I guess for me, what I would consider more extreme horror. And to be like completely honest here, I am not the biggest horror fan, which you might find surprising because I read a ton of Stephen King. But outside of that, like I haven't read a ton of horror outside of that. And there are so many horror books out there. There's so many subgenres of horror. There's extreme horror. There's point horror. There's so many different things. I'm not familiar with any of that stuff, but anything that's like too extreme, like too graphic or too sexual or too like, I don't know, if it seems a little bit extreme, like some of those things, not that I don't like them, but when I read them, I'm like, whoa, oh my God. But I will say though that that should not be a deterrent. For example, there's a story in here called Aftermath by Mr. Morningstar. And I love Mr. Morningstar's channel on BookTube, on Horrortube. He does some of the most creative videos I've ever seen. And he is very good at being very descriptive in his story, like really, really, really descriptive about some of the more violent scenes. So basically the story is about a guy that basically cleans up like crime scenes, and not just any crime scenes, like when people have been like murdered and killed, after the police come, after the investigation is over, like he's the one that actually comes in and removes the bodies, the dead bodies. So wow, Mr. Morningstar, he just has this ability to like really in detail describe what it would look like to like be in a murder scene and see those dead bodies, and I would consider that extreme, but coming from him, I didn't mind it. But that's just me. I want to say that up front because I know a lot of you that follow my channel might not necessarily be into that. I always like to approach books as I'll try anything once. So I don't read a ton of romance, but I'll try a romance. I don't read a ton of like smutty smut books, sexy books, but I'll read one every once in a while. And I don't read a ton of quote unquote extreme horror, but open mind, gotta go into this with an open mind. So like I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of stories in here that I liked, and I want to call out some of my favorites. Other than Aftermath, which I just mentioned, but another one of my favorite stories in here was It's My Job by Pax Panic. If you're on BookTube, you probably know who Pax is, but I absolutely love this story about Pax Panic. If you follow Pax and interact with her regularly, you'll know that she has a dog whose name is escaping me at the moment, but I'll try to look it up, post it if I can remember it. Pax, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. Put your puppy's name in the comments below. But this story is about a dog, and it's told from the dog's point of view, where their human basically gets attacked. Like their home gets broken into, and this dog is trying to protect their human by attacking them. And I think it's a really cool story that it's basically being told from the dog's perspective. So what's going through the dog's head as they are taking on this job of protecting their human, protecting the person that they love the most. I think that's a really cool story. And this is one of those stories that I think anyone could enjoy. It's not too extreme, it's not too horrific, and I think if you are looking to get into horror, it's probably like the perfect short story to jump in, because yes, it does have horrifying elements, but it's not too graphic, not too violent, but has a little bit of that stuff in there. I already said this to her, but Pax, if you're watching, you should definitely try writing more, because I thought the story was really great. Another of my personal favorite stories in here is, and I don't know if this is how you pronounce it, but Wendigoner by Jeremy Fee. Again, Jeremy Fee has a fantastic channel that not only does he review books and talks about books, but he also talks about his writing process too, which I think is really, really cool. And this story is like a very classic, like a monster tale. And it's about a father and a son that kind of have this like estranged relationship. Now, this story is only like 10 pages long. And within 10 pages, you really get to know this father and son and get to know their relationship. And then when they have to kind of like team up to take down this monster, it's both like, it's horrifying, but it also has this like this heart to it, because it's about real people and a real relationship. And I can't believe he got all of that in like 10 pages. I mean, that's incredible. That is incredible. And that's such a good example of like what a short story should be. It should be, quick, effective, gets you to know people, gets you to understand them, gets you to the heart of the story. And I think that's really, really cool. And of course, it's a monster tale. So cool, so cool. And another great story, I think, again, if you're looking to get into horror and don't want anything that's like too crazy, this is another great one to check out. Next up, I wanted to mention One Lonesome Night by E.D. Lewis. This is another fun story because it's kind of I don't want to call it a revenge tale, but basically it's about this guy, he's kind of walking alone in the night, and you can tell right away that this guy is kind of a jerk. He's kind of a jerk. He's been dating this girl, but then he accidentally hooked up with this girl's sister, so they had a big fight, and now he's just kind of out roaming the street. He may or may not be drunk. He's smoking a cigarette, and he's just like complaining about the girl that dumped him, like, oh, how dare she dump me just because I hooked up with her sister. Like, this guy is obviously a jerk. So lo and behold, he comes across this woman in the middle of the night. She's super hot. She's like coming on to him. And obviously this guy thinks that he thinks he's God's gift to women, so he's like, oh yeah. But what ends up happening with this this mysterious woman, don't want to give anything away, but let's just say that as a woman myself, I always like it when you see a jerky guy like get taken down a peg, if you know what I mean. So I really enjoyed that story as well. I couldn't end this video without talking about Diplomatic Immunity by David Aldrich. I posted a review of this book over on Instagram earlier this week, and I did not mention this story by David Aldrich because I did not know that this story was actually written by Dave from Dave and Olive. Most people, if you know his channel, probably only know Olive. You may not even know his name is Dave. But yes, that Dave from Dave and Olive wrote Diplomatic Immunity. This is another really cool story about this guy. He wakes up in a cell, he's in prison, and you quickly find out that this prison cell is not a typical prison, not a typical prison cell. Let's just say that there are vampires in this world. There's this guy called the Bone Drinker. You know, vampires drink bones. These people drink vampires drink blood. These other type of creatures drink bones. Really cool stuff. And what happens to this guy in this cell, don't want to give anything away, but let's just say it's another fun story. I'm a big fan of vampires myself, so any story that involves vampires I think is really fun. So Dave, again, I am so sorry that I did not know that it was you that wrote that story. I'm definitely going to go back and read it again at some point now that I know where it's coming from. As I mentioned up front, I think there is a lot of stories in here that anyone can read, even if you're not a big horror fan. However, there are some in here that are a little bit more on the extreme side, but hey, you might like that. So there's something in here for everyone, and I had such a fun time reading it and supporting my fellow creators. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment below. Let me know, have you ever read an anthology collection like this? Have you ever read something that's been published by a creator, either on YouTube, Instagram, etc.? And as always, come back soon for more bookish videos. All right, everyone, happy reading.